I'm Elizabeth Press, and I'm founder of D3M Labs. Today, I'm here with Pierre Martin. He's a friend of mine that I've known for quite a while from the Berlin data scene. Pierre, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. It's always good when we catch up because we'll talk about a whole bunch of different stuff. I can assume, but so I'm Pierre. I'm originally Canadian. I've been in Germany now for 4 years, and I'm a data leader right now. I'm VP of data at Zeal Network SE, but have been involved in a couple of different companies here in Germany over the last 4 years. So my career has always been data, but mostly making data work for business, because I think that's something that we often miss that component. So really excited to talk today.
Yeah, thank you, Pierre. And we've talked about why so many innovative ideas fail. And I think it's such a great topic to put on D3M Labs because people are always saying that Germany needs to be more innovative, companies need to be more innovative. But at least in my experience, I feel like a lot of people have a lot of innovative ideas. So the ideas aren't the problem, it's the execution that's the problem. So why do you think so many innovative ideas fail?
I think you touched on it, right? There's no shortage of ideas, especially in Germany. Every company that I've worked at has a ton of ideas as to how you want to innovate. I think what we're really missing is this execution discipline, and even a system to kind of carry them through. And if you think about it, I think what I've seen is the projects themselves or the ideas lack that clear ownership. They often, we have this idea that consensus or groupthink or everyone works together is how you're going to drive something. But a lot of these great ideas die because there's too many opinions. There's too many people in a committee where everyone wants to be driving that part of that idea or be part of it. The second thing I think is that they're also often disconnected from the actual business value. When you have an innovative idea, I mean, ultimately the company, the job is to provide a service, a product, something to the market that the market is willing to pay for. And sometimes in those cases, if you can't show why it matters to the customer, no matter how great that innovation is, it's going to be the first thing that gets cut from the budget, because ultimately as companies, as money got more expensive a couple of years ago, you have to prove the value. So innovation, great idea, love it, but hey, we can't prove why it's going to matter. I think there's, I've got two more kind of things on this one. I think the third thing is around change management. The hard part isn't about building the new thing per se, like the innovation is not there. It's actually getting people to adopt it, whether you're innovating within the company, you're innovating into your market. I mean, the change management is the piece that we often underestimate. It's kind of easy nowadays to build anything AI related if you really want to, but getting people to use it is a whole different story. And then the final thing too, I mean, we talk about it, why I think innovation dies is everything just needs to happen today. So it's like there are 15 innovative ideas that we can all get done, and it's almost like a survival of the fittest. It's one of these will work, but in reality, if you sequenced them out and you started to build momentum instead, you probably could get all 15 ideas done. But right now it's let's see who comes to the top first. Well, there's always going to be conflicts there. So I think for me right now, the real question isn't how do we get more ideas? It's actually how do we create an operating system that actually allows us to get those ideas into production without getting crushed by the organization, because it's not the market that's crushing them. They're not even seeing the light of the market. I think that's the gap that we're missing right now around why these projects fail. So long-winded answer, but that's kind of my thought around that.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and I've been talking to a lot of different people in the German innovation ecosystem and wondering why, for example, Germany is slower to bring technology to the market, or maybe slower to adopt technology that's already on the market.
Definitely a culture element where there is this requirement where we do bring more people along. And I think it has its pros and cons, right? When you bring more people along, you're more than likely that when an idea does get traction, that you've got the support internally. And I've seen most companies that's not an issue. But I think that's when you have too many voices, that's where that true idea you're maybe not as fast to build it. You're not as fast to try and fail. You want to make sure that everyone's on board before you even start. And I think that's what actually slows down. And by the time you then get to it, the momentum is lost, right? You weren't able to show quick wins. It's been 6 months since we had the idea and we haven't delivered anything. Okay, this must not be a good idea anymore. And I think that's part of, and that's a German, maybe not German, it's a little bit more European. Again, I'm Canadian, and we know that Canadians and Americans are a little bit more brash to the market and go. And there's some pros and cons there too. But obviously here in this case, I think consensus often, it slows us down beyond the point of people's interest in the idea.
And the product market fit, because there's one thing to bring the idea to the market. I think though, just looking at maybe the Canadian and the American way of also stopping products when they fail or stopping projects when they fail. And I think that something maybe the German market could also understand a bit better is when to make a gate and say, look, this really cool new idea is not working. We have to pull it and learn, but right now is the time to stop and go to the next one.
The sunk cost fallacy, right? We've invested so much time into this, and we should continue to persevere, especially if we really believe in it. But sometimes it's true. Maybe the market's not ready yet. Maybe the company's not ready yet. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It might just be the wrong time, for example.
The danger of tool-based innovation and, the danger of falling in love with the technology, falling in love with a solution, and just wanting to see it solve some problem.
Yeah. I mean, that's the entire data sector right now. I've worked in e-commerce, I've worked in a bunch of different industries, and that the one thing I've noticed from all data professionals is that's the consistent thread, right? This idea of let's buy a tool that'll solve all of our problems. And in reality, I mean, buying a tool just feels like progress. It's easy to explain. Look, we spent 100,000 euros on this tool. We were using it in some way, but I think that's the trap, is that the tool doesn't actually solve the problem by itself. It's kind of the fundamental element behind it. And I think right now, in my opinion, is it's easy for us to, let's go use this cool new tool that this company's built, but you haven't solved the actual problem, which is do you have the right people? Do you have the right process? Do you have the right adoption plan? Do you have the right problem to solve? And from there, based on those elements, you can end up that the tool might be the solution, but a lot of the times it's the underlying processes behind it that require this tool, and it's still going to fail even with the best tool in the market. So then you end up with this lovely museum of tools that no one uses. You look at your P&L and you're wondering why you're spending $500,000 on tools that no one really knows about.
Why is it that everyone wants to monetize data? Data is the new gold mine, or it's the new yellow cake or platinum or whatever. People seem to see the value in data, but they don't want to make the investments in data. And in the end of the day, the customers don't pay for insights, and they don't pay for the data in the way that they pay for maybe hardware or services.
Look, I think the last decade has been a masterclass in what not to do with data, in my opinion. We hit a peak in 2015 when a dashboard changed the way the organization thought about using data. And ever since then, it's been kind of just rehashing the same thing, but in a slightly different way. Now, that's not every company, and that's not every data department, but I think that everyone at a certain point thought that more volume equaled more value. If we can collect everything, we'll be rich as a company. But in reality, that kind of didn't work. It was going back to the same thing. Data only creates value when it changes decisions or makes a better customer experience or creates a product that you can leverage. And you and I a couple of weeks ago talked about, the drone industry and the data there, and kind of just how powerful these little devices are, and how ultimately there's this element about monetizing it that you talked about, right? So there's different ways that we can monetize data. And I think one of the things we have to be mindful is it's not about Facebook or Meta or whatever that is, and the way that they monetize data. That's one way, but I believe there's 3 ways that we can monetize data, and they each become easier as you go along. So the first one is this idea that you can influence decisions, right? I, as a human with data, give another human data that they then use to make an educated decision with. And that's really hard to monetize, right? That's really hard to quantify, not monetize, but quantify the value of that monetization. How do I know that my little piece of data that I gave to you helped you drive something or avoided something, right? So that's the one that this industry's been built off for the longest time. We build dashboard, you look at it, you do something. I don't know what you did with it, but you do something. And then we're chasing this value creation. The second one, which is a little bit more tangible, is that we actually sell data. And many companies sell data, whether it's anonymized or they sell it to other tools. You see it in your household nowadays where these tools talk to each other and they're selling data to each other so that they can make your experience more seamless, right? When your Apple Watch talks to your light bulbs, I mean, those are oftentimes two different companies, but they talk to each other and they sell data to each other so they understand how you use the patterns, right? As an example. And that's quite easy to value. We sold it for $100,000, we made $100,000. Perfect. The third one is where it gets really interesting in this sector now, and that applies to across the board, is how do you leverage data to make your product better? And that could be things like we hear about personalization, right? Where I build an AI model or a machine learning model that changes the experience of the customer. I can tangibly see that that experience led to an increase in, I don't know, basket size if it's your website, or an increase in usage, or an increase in the user using it on a daily basis. Now I can start to really scale, because imagine a little bit like a 1% improvement in basket size or a 1% improvement in daily usage, but multiply that by your audience of 1, 5, 10, a million, a billion maybe in some cases. And now you're starting to see where that company can really quantify the value. And so I think the reason why we have struggled with that is we've been stuck in phase one. No one wants to go to phase two, especially in Europe with GDPR and understanding the value. And phase three is where we're starting to get into, but phase three also requires some investment. You need data governance investments, you need quality investments, and you actually need the business to believe that it can help. And I think that's the kind of, when you tie those three together, we're just not there yet. I think that's, again, long answer, but I think that's where, as leaders, or even just, not even data leaders, but leaders in general, that's where we need to incentivize our teams to get into, is how do we create that final tier? Because that's the real unlock in value across any sector. It doesn't just have to be e-commerce or online social media. It could be any sector in the world.
Yeah, I mean, data is a component. It's part of the fabric of greater value. And when we look at the return on investment that a company would get in including data as part of the value of a new innovative product, you have to look at it as one component, and then using cloud technology and connectivity, that's what scales, and that's what makes the ROI there. And I think that we have to have the business cases that are that big and that scalable in order to justify the large investments on data governance and data quality.
And I think what we need to get into is this: what business use case are we trying to solve? And let's do the governance for that. Let's do the process for that. Let's really tie it to that specific use case, because then if it works, you do the next use case and you can leverage some of the things you do. And in reality, if we said, okay, we got this one specific use case, we believe it'll bring in $1 million for this organization, and we need to do some governance to support it, then absolutely, that's where the value comes in, because the governance is only a small part of the product that you're building.